Leading through the southern suburbs and all your roads in and around Northwest Indiana. That's traffic. I'm Jeremy Scott on AM 560. The Answer.
Chicago's Morning Answer continues next. Your official Chicagoland weather forecast from our 1-hour heating and air conditioning weather center and our meteorologist, Steve Williams.
Cloudy with occasional rain around this afternoon. Our high today, 40. Some evening rain tonight, otherwise clouds, low 30. Considerable cloudiness tomorrow morning. Sun by the afternoon, high 36. Partly sunny Wednesday, high 27. I'm Steve Williams on AM 560, The Answer.
33 at O'Hare. Next news coming up at 7. Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan and Amy continues next on AM 560, The Answer.
Listen to AM 560, The Answer, online at 560theanswer.com, on the AM 560 mobile app, on your Alexa-powered smart speaker, on TuneIn, iHeart, and radio.
A direct response to the New York Times' 1619 project. The 1619 project we've talked a lot about on this show. You have the 1619 project being backed to the extent that they're able to advertise
during the Oscars,
their ahistorical
and
perspective.
During the Super Bowl.
During the Oscars.
Yeah, sorry.
And also during this weekend's NBA All-Star game, as I understand it as well. And so the question becomes, and by the way, there's a partnership between Woodson 1776 and the Washington Examiner, WashingtonExaminer.com. There were a dozen essays released in direct response to the essays that were released by the 1619 project. I shouldn't say in part in response to the 1619 essays that frame their project, and in part it's a completely different narrative that 1776 seeks to tell, and we'll get to that with Bob. But the WashingtonExaminer.com, our friends over there, have partnered with Woodson to amplify these essays, and so they're rolling out essays and interviews over the next couple of weeks. Stay tuned for that with some of the scholars. And interestingly, it also includes people that have been historically center-left, that are still center-left, but not on this. People like Clarence Page, Chicago Tribune, who was one of the first essays that Washington Examiner rolled out, and he was at the press conference and spoke as well. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Bob Woodson, founder and president of the Woodson Center, and founder of the 1776 effort as well. Bob, thanks for being with us again. Appreciate it.
Always a pleasure to be with you, Dan.
So it seems to me if I had to boil down the difference between 1776 and 1619 in one word, it would be agency. The 1776 believe Black Americans have agency, and 1619 doesn't.
That is true. I think 1619 really is an assault on the self-esteem of Black America, when you really think about it, because what they say throughout their essays is that because of the birth defect of slavery in America, that America's founding principles, as enshrined in a Declaration of Independence, are false, and therefore racism is in the DNA of the country, and therefore white America is forever stained by it, and Black America are forever victimized by it. And the only answer, according to Nicole James, is reparations, the government. And so what that, and they make no reference of Black America. In other words, they painted Black America's history in America as coming off of slave ships to plantations to the ghettos to welfare. And that has not been Black America's trajectory. Because Black, as I said in the essays, that when white America was at its worst, Black America was at its best.
And
So go ahead, Ben.
And you can get all those essays at 1776unites.com. 1776unites.com is the website. But yeah, so picking up on that, one of the curious things about the 1619 project that you've raised and others have raised too is why won't you tell the stories of Black achievement and resilience, even in the face of racist institutions like slavery or Jim Crow? Why won't you tell the story of Black Wall Street in Tulsa or the Black Business District in Durham, North Carolina during Jim Crow? Why won't you tell the stories of success and elevate examples that Black Americans today could emulate. It's a curious omission, isn't it?
It really is. And what's dangerous about it is that the young Black Americans being raised in these toxic neighborhoods where there's violence and out of wedlock births, they're being told that the conditions that they're facing today have nothing to do with the choices that they're making, that is because of systemic racism emanating from the history of slavery in America. That's a dangerous message to be sending to a people, that your faith in the future is defined by somebody that everybody says does not like you. And that's what's dangerous about it. You talk about agency in the city of Chicago in 1929, as one of our essays point out. Black Americans owned 731 businesses in areas of Chicago. In 1929, we had $100 million in real estate assets. That's just in Chicago in the face of segregation. And all over the nation, there is proof that we thrived and progressed in the midst of oppression. But our young people today are not going to be told these stories of success. And that's what's, they're not going to be told that.
Right, and the 1619 project is already being taught in thousands of classrooms across the country, and sadly, even in Chicago public schools. So how, as a parent, how do I counter that? What can we do to help?
Well, one of the things we're trying to do, and it's a David and Goliath situation, but we're trying to amass the resources at 1776 to present the information that our scholars are giving us that talks about these successes. We really need a ground game. This is trench warfare. Conservatives sometimes have a difficult time fighting a trench warfare, but we're going to get down and take these essays and create curriculum. We're going to take animations. We're going to provide parents an alternative to this garbage coming from 1619. So we're going to put in the hands of parents, teachers, and people so that they can have an alternative to the propaganda that is coming from the left in this 1619 project.
Well, and it's a complete history too, right? I mean, the Clarence Page makes this point that, hey, look, I'm happy to talk about slavery and Jim Crow and the history of America and the mistakes that were made and the sins that were committed as much as you want to. But I think we should also talk about the future, answer the question that Martin Luther King asked at the end of his life after the 64 Civil Rights Act: where do we go from here? So Clarence Page makes the point, look, I want to talk about the whole thing, but we can't continue to look to our future in the rearview mirror. We have to say, okay, how do I succeed, and how do I become a mover and shaker, and how do I help other people to become a mover and shaker? And that also seems to be a question that 1619 doesn't want to ask, much less answer.
No, and a very simple way of describing it, it's like looking at Hank Aaron through the prism of 1619, you would say he was a strikeout champ. But looking at it through 1776, you say, well, he's the all-time home run champ.
I like that. The other thing that a number of the scholars, the point that they made throughout, and you can see their interviews at 1776unites.com as well as their essays, is whoever said America was perfect. The preamble of the Constitution, in order to form a more perfect union. And we're still in that process. We will forever be, because we're fallible human beings, of attempting to form a more perfect union. So the question shouldn't be, is America perfect? We all agree it's not, and it never was, and it never will be. The question is, are we efforting to form a more perfect union? And are we living up to Lincoln's promise to usher in a new birth of freedom, right?
I agree, but you can personalize it. As I ask groups, how many of us listening to this program want to be judged by the dumbest thing we did when we were young?
Not me.
Not me either. And so, because our life is not defined by what we used to be, our life is defined as what we have become. And the nation should be judged the same way. Slavery was America's defect, but the fact that in every war defending this nation, blacks gave their lives willingly in defense, and not one was found guilty of treason. Are you telling me, 1619, that somehow the sacrifices that they were made was for a nation that was racist? Were they defending slavery? Or were they defending the ideal of what America's promise held? We are the only country to really have an Emancipation Proclamation. We are the only country that fought a war over ending slavery. Where else in the world was that done?
And so the 1619 Project's thesis is that that racism is part of America's DNA, and so there's nothing that can be done about it other than to impose their versions of restorative justice.
Yeah, that means pay them more money. It's amazing that all of the authors in that series, all making probably six-figure incomes. They live in safe, secure neighborhoods. Their children are going to the best schools. They don't have to suffer the consequences of their advocacy. But can you imagine a 10-year-old black child being grown up in Chicago and being told from the time he's till 10 to 18 that America is racist and an evil empire, and yet when he gets 18, he's being asked to join the military to defend it, or join the police force to defend this domestically? That's what's really dangerous about this 1619. It's insinuating negative impressions of the nation. People of color are coming from all over the world to be here. If we were such a racist country, as one of our authors said, why are black? This is the destination of first choice of black and brown people from all over the world.
I want to go back to something you said about, well, this is my term, but candy-ass conservatives, and what's different about this project, where you have, as I mentioned at the outset, all these scholars, academics like John Sibley Butner from University of Texas and Glenn Lowry from Brown University and so many others, are right here, Jason Hill from DePaul University, along with the activists, the social service providers, the clergy that are doing real things on the ground, that have real models that could and probably should be scaled around the country. And the scholars, the thinkers with the doers, they're on equal footing in this project. And that seems to me something very different than what I've seen from other, public policy, intellectual movements more recently.
Yeah, because in other words, the reason we deliberately brought people together, some of them have recovered from predatory past. They were criminals in the past, but through God's grace, they've been redeemed. Some of them are single moms who started out in poverty and then went on to become university professors. In other words, I believe you convince people to embrace the values when you show them evidence that embracing the virtues and values of America will produce better people. That's why nothing prevails against an argument than an experience or a narrative or a witness.
Yeah, well, yeah, right. So it was interesting because Carol Swain, who's one of the intellectuals, she was a high school dropout, single mom with 3 kids by the age of 21, went on to be a tenured professor at Vanderbilt University. We've had her on the show before. And she said at the press conference, she just didn't pay attention to what was going on around her. She wouldn't let the racism around her as she was growing up stop her from pursuing her educational dreams. She said, I had to go to graduate school to learn that I was a victim and that I couldn't do all the things that I had already accomplished. And so but the idea is like you have people that are putting these values into practice that the intellectuals sort of theorize about and talk about. And that's the proof and the connection between the big idea and the big idea in practice.
Yeah, I think that's a priceless clip that everybody ought to see that just what transformation looks like. And that's what we're trying to promote around the country is that you are never defined of what you used to be, that you are defined. And it's ironic that if 1619 says that Black America cannot achieve until white America does something to free them, well, that's white supremacy.
He is Bob Wood. Go ahead, Bob. Finish your thought. I'm sorry.
No, that to me is raw white supremacy to say to blacks, even though I escaped and I'm living a successful life, the rest of you can't until white people free you. That's white supremacy.
Yes, the contradictions of the 1619 Project abound, which is why the 1776 was formed. 1776unites.com. 1776unites.com is the website. Bob Woodson is the visionary behind the project, founder and president of the Woodson Center. Bob, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
Before you see it on TV, share it on Facebook, or read about it in the paper. Hear it here first. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
The Lou Dobbs Financial Report is brought to you by Signature Bank, helping local businesses succeed. Visit signaturebank.bank for your commercial banking needs.
I'm Lou Dobbs. No trading on Wall Street today because of President's Day holiday. Unilever curbing its ice cream advertising for kids, and economic reports out this week. Those stories next. In a recent survey, investors shared what they felt were the greatest threats to their retirement. It's no surprise the most common threats include stock market volatility, economic uncertainty, conflict in the Middle East, the 2020 presidential impeachment and election. Unfortunately, there are many threats beyond your control that can affect your retirement savings. At Gold